This week on the Retirement Quick Tips podcast, I'm sharing with you some key takeaways from the book, What Your Money Means and How to Use It Well by Frank Hanna. If you've stuck with me so far this week, I've probably said some things that have made you a little bit uncomfortable, maybe some things you disagree with. But as I mentioned on Monday's intro episode, the goal is to seek the truth, find the truth, and then when we find the truth, to live in accordance with the truth. And a lot of the concepts in this book are completely in contradiction to the way that our modern society tells us we should live and tells us how we should handle our money. Whereas this book talks about the importance of stewardship and especially what to do with that non-essential wealth. In other words, once your fundamentals are provided for, and these come in 4 categories. If you miss that, it's central to this idea, but go back and listen to Tuesday's episode where I defined what those 4 categories are the fundamentals. But once your fundamentals are covered, both in the present and 10, 15, 20 years, however long you have on this earth, once they're covered in the present and into the future, now that is a hard thing to determine, but you can provide a ballpark number there. That is not impossible to do. I do it all the time with clients. How much money do you need to ensure that this is going to last? And then above and beyond that, that would be your non-essential wealth. And throughout the book, Frank Hanna argues that once we've determined how much we need in the fundamentals and we've provided for that, what is left over is what makes us wealthy or rich, and that is non-essential wealth. So how do we deal with that? Well, as I also talked about earlier this week, it is not to be spent on ourselves and living in comfort and pleasure. It is meant for the common good. He talks about this concept of the universal destination of goods. I'm not talking about communism here, but like by our own choice, we have a responsibility, if we have non-essential wealth, to provide for the fundamentals of other people. It's not meant that like you quit your job and you stop working and you give all your money away. No, that's not what he's saying. In fact, he talks about how your wealth can and should continue to grow so that you can provide for the fundamentals and you can provide for the common good of others. And so he lays out a formula for giving that helps people, he says, to live in accordance with the meaning of the non-essential wealth that we've been permitted to have. So each year, we should contribute to the common good, whichever is greater of these 3 categories. So the greater amount. The first one is 10% of the increase in our after-tax net worth. This is a pretty easy number to calculate, especially if you're looking at your previous year's tax return. Once your taxes are done, you can say, okay, for the next year, I'm going to give X amount. So you have an increase in your net worth. Whatever that is, your investments grow in value. Of course, you have to pay taxes on this. So it's the 10% of the increase in our net worth. That leaves 90% to go back into being reinvested and continuing to grow. Another way that you could measure this in terms of giving would be 10% of the value of what we consumed on living expenses in that year. Again, this is pretty important. So if you're spending, let's just use a nice round number. You spend $100,000 on housing, transportation, gas, groceries, insurance, etc. Well, this goes back to the tithing concept that has been around for thousands of years. Whatever 10% of what our income is or what we're spending, that should be going towards giving away, and especially on causes that contribute to the common good. And then the last one and the last way that you could measure it is you take an amount equal to your net worth today and you divide that by the number of years you could be expected to live. So you get out an actuarial table. If you're 60 years old today and you're male, your life expectancy is probably roughly 25 to 30 more years. If you're female, it's a bit longer. So you take your net worth. Let's say your net worth is $2 million and you have 20 more years to live. So what is that? $100,000 a year that you would give away. So what he's saying here is that you should contribute whichever is greater. Now that seems radical, like especially that last formula. It's like, that's a lot of money. Well, the intention and the goal here, according to Frank Hanna, and I would agree with that, is that you don't want to have excess wealth. Again, there's two categories here. There's the fundamentals and providing for yourself and your needs, even beneficial goods, and covering all those fundamentals. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about ensuring that by the time you get to the end of your life, that you have given away to the extent that you can anything left over, all the non-essential wealth. And he emphasizes that, a lot of people will do this at their death, but there's a lot of problems with that. One of which being is that you can't see and kind of keep tabs on and monitor how your money is being used by the organizations that you give it to. So at least by giving consistently, that you are able to practice your own generosity, practice detachment, building that consistency and habit and skill in giving over time, because it's not an easy thing to do. So beyond that, it allows you to kind of make sure that your money is continuing to be used for things that are consistent with your values. Whereas if you just wait till the end of your life, you better hope that whoever you put in place has the exact same set of values as you and is going to be discerning in giving that money away. And I wouldn't trust that. It's better. It's like, if you want something done right, you better do it yourself. And giving is no different. Another reason to give and give generously if you have non-essential wealth is that you can use this giving and these conversations to create this, what he calls a school of virtue, and teaching others to be generous, your family, etc. So I'm not going to go into that, but it is something he talks about in the book at length, and how to go about doing this to encourage that same spirit of generosity among your family and your children. The last thing, I think a big roadblock that people have to giving consistently, especially substantial amounts of giving, and why they're just more comfortable doing it end of life instead, is that you may not have something specific that you want to give money to. So for example, let's say you have $100,000 to give this year, and you may be stuck. There might not be any initiatives that you're really excited about that are going to fulfill what you want your money to be used for. There are vehicles that allow you to put that money aside and get it out of your bank account today and set it aside for that use. Like a donor advised fund is a perfect example. So you also have some options if you're not exactly sure what to do in this very moment. This is something I would also strongly recommend for anybody that has a sudden increase in wealth, whether you receive an inheritance, maybe you sell a business, you sell some stock or a piece of real estate that's significant. All of these things are reason enough. You don't need to decide right now where that money is going to go, but don't let that be a reason to hold on to your money either. Again, we want to be stewards of this. We want to give it away. We want to be generous. And there are vehicles to do that until you decide who to specifically write that check to. All right, that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. My name is Ashley Mitchikay, and this is the Retirement Quick Tips Podcast.